I've been working on the Pythagorean tradition again, finishing that chapter. And I think it was Pythagoras who first really joined up these things. Now, he spent time in Egypt, a long time studying, and also in Babylon, as well as Greece. I want to read something from the wonderful work, if you don't know, by Edward Schuré, a Frenchman from Strasbourg area. He wrote a very important book called The Great Initiates, a study of the secret history of religions, which he wrote way back, before World War I, in fact. And he was a friend of Wagner, a friend of Rudolf Steiner, a friend of many great intellectuals at the pre-World War I time. One of the reasons I hate World War I so much is there was so much good going on in Europe at the time. So many great thinkers were coming together. It's where the International Congress of Philosophy had been launched in Paris in 1900, and it's still going today. You know, I go to it every 5 years. Edward Schuré is born in Strasbourg in 1841, so around about the same time that Pierre Leroux was here. And he was a kind of omnivore intellectual, amazing man. He fell in love one day later with an opera singer, Margherita Albani Mignati, Italian. And he loved music, that's why he went and met Wagner and they became great friends. But he also, you know, and he hated World War I as well, because he loved France and German culture, and he knew they shouldn't be at each other's throats. In 1889, this book came out, and as it says, it's a study of the secret history of religions. And I think it's one of the most exciting and interesting attempts to do what I call a transpersonal history of religions that's ever been attempted. To redo it now, we could do it with much more detail, much more scholarship, but it's incredible what he did achieve, given that, you know, it was the sort of age before the internet and all that. And he has chapters on the following figures who he counts as the great initiates: Rama from India, Krishna, Hermes from Egypt, Moses, Orpheus, Pythagoras, Plato, and Jesus. Well, that's a pretty good list, right? If you could go and interview, I mean, I would have added obviously Muhammad and, you know, Guru Nanak and Mahavira and Buddha to my list of great initiates if I was writing the book. But and I'm sure he would have done if he had opportunity, you know. But what he did do is go into great detail in the ones he did study. And it's a kind of, it's like poetic plus scientific rediscovery of what it might have been like to live as Pythagoras or Jesus or Orpheus or Moses. And he's asking from the inside. Now this is, I think, to me, one of the most important projects historians should be doing, is reclaiming the secret history of religions. And that's why I'm doing my book on religious maths, really. It's a way of doing that in depth. Anyway, what he says about Pythagoras is as follows. In this legend of the Hyperboreans, the esoteric essence of the myth of Apollo sheds its brilliant rays. The country of the Hyperboreans is the afterlife, the multicoloured regions. Apollo himself personifies immaterial and intelligible light, of which the sun is but the physical reflection, and whence flows all truth. The wondrous swans which draw him are the poets, the divine genii, messengers of his great solar soul, leaving in their wake tremors of light and melody. Hyperborean Apollo, therefore, personifies the descent from heaven to earth, the incarnation of spiritual beauty in flesh and blood, the afflux of transcendent truth through inspiration and divination. I just want to share that paragraph because I'm going to be talking very shortly about my work at Stonehenge. And in the ancient world, the world of the Greeks, Orpheus, Pythagoras and so on, they were in touch with the Druids and they knew about Stonehenge. It was a great temple to Hyperborean Apollo. Now, Hyperborean Apollo means Apollo from the far north, beyond Boreas, the north wind. That's Britain, that's Stonehenge. And the Greeks knew some of them had actually gone there. Pythagoras sailed around Britain, and others, sailors from Marseille, Greeks. So they mapped it, and there was toing and froing between the Greek philosophers and the Druids. And we know that Pythagoras had a friend called Abaris, who was a Druid from the Hyperborean Apollo traditions. And there are little glimpses of all this, which I've investigated in great detail in my book on the Encyclopedia of Druid Studies, which has a huge section on Shure, by the way, because, of course, he was interested in Druids. And although he doesn't have one listed in his, the people of the great initiates that he looks at, he wrote other works about Druids, and he was a Gaul himself from France, deeply imbued with the Druidic way of thinking, as was Steiner. And also Wagner himself was inspired by Druidry to some extent. His very first operatic piece was a fairy story taken from Celtic mythology. And the theme of a lot of his later operas are very Druidical, in fact. So yes, I've been working on the mathematics, the religious mathematics of Pythagoras. And the other thing I've been looking at is the question of stages of faith as a mathematical puzzle, because a very important theologian called James Fowler wrote a very important book in the 80s, 70s called Stages of Faith. And he proposed a sequence of faith stages that we all go through if you're on a spiritual journey. You start as a young child with a very sort of trusting, naive faith. Then it becomes educated, you learn the scriptures, you study the Bible, the Quran, whatever. But at that age, it's literal. When it says that Jericho's walls fell down and trumpet was sounded, you believe that literally. You can see the pictures in your mind. I remember as a little boy at an Anglican primary school in Brighton being taught the parables like, if you build your house on sand, the house falls down. Jesus' images, and I could see them as a little boy, and I thought, no, I'm going to build mine on rock, because that's that literal kind of phase. Then you go into a slightly more open and fluid type of faith, where you realise that it's not the legends, the stories, the myths that are important, it's the conceptual framework and ideas behind them. So you're more able to cope with conceptual things as you mature. And then later you go on through the stages of faith until eventually you end up, according to Fowler, much more laid back in your boundaries. Your faith becomes what he calls universal or enlightened. And so you may start at any one, place on the periodic table. You might start as a Jain or a Buddhist or a Christian or a Sikh. But gradually, faith development brings you to a place of enlightenment. Now, is that common and universal to all? That's a mathematical question. Is the enlightenment intensity achieved by a Sufi the same as a Kabbalist or a Christian, Catholic, Jesuit, or a Druid from Stonehenge? Discuss mathematically, So that's what I've been working on, looking at the question of stages of faith, and it's very, very interesting. Are the stages of faith Fowler talks about the same in Buddhist faith, which don't really have a sort of God at the end of the tunnel? What about in Judaism? Different stories, different narratives. Is it the same faith development? What about in Jainism or Sikhism or Zoroastrianism? So that's what I've been working on. And I've also been looking at very interesting other question of psychological types. This is a question posed by 19th century psychologists, culminated in Jung's work on psychological types, which he wrote in 1921, arguing there are different types of people. There are extroverts and introverts, there are intuitives, intellectuals, feeling types, sensing types. And I think by and large this is true. You know, you look around your friends, your family, your neighbours, the world, and we see people are into those kind of things. I mean, I'm more of an intellectual type, obviously, than a sensing type. I'm not very good at downhill skiing, for instance. I tried it, once, and it was challenging. I'm not a very good skier. And so I watch people in the Olympics, hurtling down on their skis at 100 miles an hour, going on a huge jump. And I take my hat off. They're sensing types, masters of the game. And I have a woman friend in Slovenia who used to do that stuff for Slovenia. I mean, amazing. Okay, so sensing types do that kind of thing. Feeling types are the sort of counsellors, the lovers, the empaths, the compassionate types. And they're incredibly important too. We all need feelings of love in our lives and support and friendship and so on. And then there's the intuitive types who are more spiritual, who kind of get the bigger picture. And then finally the intellectual types that want to think it all through logically. And then they can come in different forms, either extrovert or introvert. So anyway, that's part of what Jung did. It was then developed by a mother and daughter team, Myers-Briggs, who made it even more complicated and more effective, actually, as a tool for essentially personality testing. And it was then developed and used in personnel management, which my father worked in the 50s and 60s. He was a personnel manager. I wish he was alive. One could have talked about these things. Because part of a good personnel officer is you measure the skills and aptitudes of each person in the workforce, and then you make sure they're placed in the right job. Nowadays, thinking in leadership development is that rather than finding qualities and skills in the person that you want for the job you preordained, you should find what skills and aptitudes the person has and then build a job around that. I take the view as a teacher that every child is a potential genius, not just the guys at the top. What if we unleashed the genius in everyone at all levels of society, in all levels of the classroom or the corporation, and then built our structures of social intercourse around the unleashing of that mutual genius. Anyway, these are interesting questions, and they're to do with psychological types. So I've been looking at the maths of all that. Then I want to tell you, as I promised, about the work for Stonehenge, because this last week we've had online a wonderful Zoom conference. I set up this Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Stonehenge back in 1998, thinking naively that this was the work of a few years and everyone would live happily ever after. It's, if you're not familiar with the Battle of the Beanfield, it was a horrendous attack on personal rights, on freedom of religion, on the right to travel and roam about, when a bunch of policemen who were shielded, they had fake identity badges on and they were all in black, attacked a hippie convoy, a group of vehicles that were moving towards Stonehenge to celebrate the summer solstice. And it was a natural temple that they used to love and would go and have their hippie festival. It was the early 70s when it started. I myself went there in 74, 75. It was part of that sort of hippie awakening enlightenment that we had in the Summer of Love in Britain, in Wessex culture. And I was part of that. I didn't actually go to the festival that got trashed. And in 1985, the police attacked this convoy with vicious hostility and smashed all the vehicles, wounded, traumatized people, and it was horrendous. Now, That was under Thatcher at the time she was taking on the miners. And I was brought this case in '98, setting up a mediation service for multi-faith disputes. And I took it on because it's an important archetypal case. It's the power of the state being wielded against ordinary, peace-loving hippie types, and alternatives and travellers and druids and pagans. And because their paradigm is outside the norm of capitalism, acquisitive society, which was promoted by Thatcher and her cronies, that the thing is to buy, work, earn, pay taxes, and fund the military and, bomb anybody that protests. I mean, she was in bed with Pinochet, the Chilean junta chap, and she'd whipped up this hatred of anything that looked like God, society. There's no such thing as society. Her attack on socialism was to discredit society itself. And it all came to a head in this Battle of the Beanfield. And although I wasn't there, I do feel it personally as if I had been. I've interviewed people who were. And to me it's an intellectual error, Thatcherism, to attack society, to attack ordinary working class people. These were not rich hippies that could be New Agers like Richard Branson types, glamping. These are just normal people from council estates all over Britain. It was their one big thing. They wanted to go and worship the sun and dance around. Okay, maybe they take their tops off and there's a bit of nudity. That's their human right to celebrate the sun god. Apollo. These are the descendants of the Hyperborean Apollo worshippers. Well, so that's why I took the case on. And we had a brilliant online forum on Zoom. We had some, movers and shakers, Rollo and Roy and others were there talking about it. And thanks to all that came. It was recorded. I will play it up on our site. And then we finished with a lovely play put on through Annalise Adair of the Pacifica Graduate Institute, who's helping with the Mary Magdalene studies, and some of her friends did a little play about the goddess and Equinox and Isis and, what's not to love. It was a great little play. You can watch it online. I'm not going to spoil the fun. So thanks to all for that. But I think the symbolism of this is very important because we are in a struggle, a race for our lives between wisdom and stupidity and ignorance. It's the same struggle that was going on when Jesus was coming in on Palm Sunday through the Golden Gate off the Mount of Olives, and I walked that trail. Nowadays the gate is locked. You can't come in anymore. I've said in my Golden Gate project we should reopen it and make it a welcome place for spiritual pilgrims from all over the earth. Whatever their faith, let's transcend this bitter rivalry of tribal divisions. I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, I'm Protestant, I'm Jewish Orthodox, I'm Sunni, no, I'm Shia, no, I'm Ismaili, I'm pagan of the Wiccan variety, no, I'm pagan of the Asatru kind, Let's recognise that we're all from the one light, right? The Apollo of divine universal, adamantine brilliance inspires us all. And the goddess is one, too, underlying the diversity. That's what I've been exploring in the mathematics book. I believe it's the case. And that means we have to outgrow war, because war is the manifestation of that hostility, of division, of duality. We can only do that through love, which is the force of unity and acceptance of the other. When you embrace the other and love them, then all need for violence falls away and is replaced by the embrace. Well, that's the Dionysian way, and that's the Pagan Bear, and it's the way of Christ. That's why he came in through the Golden Gate on a donkey, because Dionysus' animal is the donkey. He rode the donkey specifically for that reason, as a symbol, as James Hillman would say, to show future generations that in Christ was moving the spirit of Dionysus, as well as Apollo, in harmony, joined. So that's kind of what our play was about. And thank you so much. And then to finish, I just want to say, okay, so on the 30th of this month, we have the World Intellectual Forum meeting in a couple of days' time. I'm still coordinating that for Europe. It's so important, the work that we do, I think, as intellectuals from all different varieties and backgrounds. You're very welcome to get involved. Tune in. It's always on the 30th of the month. And we never quite know who's coming, but this month we have some very important intellectuals coming and talking, including my friend Dr. S.L. Gandhi, a leading Jain, who survived COVID. And we also have Professor Glenn Martin from Virginia, Radford University, who's talking about the metaphysics and philosophy behind his World Parliament Association, which is trying to create a world parliament. We need that internationalism in this era of division and nationalism and Brexit and all that nonsense. We need to go global and celebrate Gaia. It's a round ball we're living on. Let's celebrate that roundness, and let's have humility to embrace each other in love. Right, okay, I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to finish with a poem, as is my wont, and I will then take my leave. Poems seem to have... Hang on, I'm going to go and get the poem. Right, so this is from volume 7 of my poems. I've published 7 volumes so far. And, poetry can say things that ordinary prose maybe can't. Finding the right word. Okay. Okay, this is poem 930. O unreflexive love. O unreflexive love, and undeliverable love. O love believable, yet unbelievable. O love enchanted, yet enchained. O love well known, yet indecipherable. O love unclassifiable, undauntable. Love beyond any label. O love heard among Babel's whisperings. Strange language from the primal source. Before Aristotle's laughter ever shocked. Beyond Diogenes' brow ever upwrinkled. Even beyond Odysseus, unreachably, never returning home. Caught rugged and biding his time, bound up among goddesses, silenced by sirens, again and again, yet delivered, sinewy and miraculous, from the one-eyed men who see nothing but behind their walls. Oh, what walls! O strangenesses of strangers, and stranger still, the closest lovers, trusted yet most untrustworthy. Teach us your secret alphabets of desires, dreamed and dreaded, hard to put down or to take up even. Your whispering clusters of consonants, rattling in our laughter like the languages of birds, or old loves long scattered as leaves, breeze tremblings, or spirit generously giving of itself over and over like the land, like bread. O mournful Lord of the dead, who brings all before your great round eyes, grieving. Teach us to love. Teach us all, yet, how to love.